Hey nerds, it's your host, Larry Brantley, and you're probably asking yourself, why does Larry sound like a prepubescent 13-year-old boy? Well, I'm getting over a bout of the flu, and since I did not want to afflict my friends Micah and Brent with this illness, we thought this would be a great time to do a special bonus episode of Nerdherfers. On this week's bonus episode, we are talking about all things music. Yes, we are all music geeks at heart. We're going to share some stories about meeting some of our musical heroes. If you've got one of those stories about meeting your musical hero, drop it in the comments section. We'd love to read about it, maybe talk about it. In the meantime, please enjoy this special episode. We're going to call it the flu episode of Nerdherfers.
Here we go. Marquito, let's go. Is that a kid or is that a dog?
I don't know. It does sound like a call of distress.
So, all right. So going back to our discussion about what you were saying about, when Larry realized what it is for the fans, how for the fan themselves, it's 10 times more of that. I was saying it earlier, it's hard to tell a lot of times, but what attracts you to a fandom or gives you the affinity for a certain fandom. But you said something earlier that kind of reminded me that a lot of it is, and I'll switch over. I'm going to switch genres a little bit. My favorite band in the entire world is the only band worth worshiping, and that is Rush. No other band exists. I'm just kidding.
You and I are going to have a knife fight.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I like all kinds of music, but Rush is my absolute all-time favorite band. And you will hear, again, no matter what the fandom is, if it's music, movies, books, whatever, there's probably a time in that person's life where they were going through something. And that thing helped them get through it.
True story.
And that just becomes a part of them at that point.
Yep.
Right? And so I think a lot of times, and Rush was that way for me. I mean, a lot of their music, especially in the 70s and 80s, was about outsiders because they were all outsiders growing up, right?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of kids who were in our situation where, we're not part of the whatever popular crowd or whatever. We're in the nerdy crowd and stuff. And a lot of times that music, it's like, without sounding like a stalker, it's like they're speaking to you, like they wrote that song for you. Yeah, too late. Like they wrote that song for you about, there's songs about, subdivisions is a popular Rush song.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about, how the kids living in the subdivisions are kind of outside the norm. And so that's a song that greatly appealed to a lot of kids. Again, talking about how your fandom inspires you. So I started playing guitar because of Rush, because of Alex Lifeson. We started a Rush cover band when I was 15.
Wait a minute. You started a Rush cover band when you were 15?
Yeah.
Holy shit, man.
That
music is complicated.
That was like 50 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. We didn't even have real guitars
Were
back
your
then.
parents even alive then?
We just picked up a stick and put a piece of string on it, and that was our guitar. No, we started Rush covering. It was funny, and so I'm living here in this town, and it was way smaller back then, right? Hardly anything here. And there were two whole bands in our high school. One of them was a rock and roll cover band, like Motley Crue and all that kind of stuff. And we were the Rush cover band. We never got to do anything. We tried out for a battle of the bands. They were like, we tried out with Tom Sawyer, and they're like,
thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, yeah. And we would go to play parties because we had high school parties, and with their two bands in town, you didn't have much of a choice. We never got asked back.
No.
Yeah. Well,
We had to add other songs to our repertoire so people would have us back to parties. Because
Well, that's what happens when you play Tom Sawyer over and
Right,
over
yeah.
and over and over.
you go into a party and you're playing like Spirit of Radio or
all right,
something.
you
Like,
guys,
what
we're
is
going to
this?
play one called YYZ. Get ready. They're not singing. It's been like 7 minutes. They're not singing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to I've got to join the train, as reluctant as I am, and tell you that the Rush song for me that did that, Red Barchetta.
Oh.
Ooh.
Because that was from the Moving Pictures album.
Yep.
It was definitely a B cut. I mean, now you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But it didn't get a lot of airplay back in the day. It was Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
Limelight and stuff.
Because it's the story that song tells about his uncle and his uncle's car.
Yeah.
And his uncle bringing him into that.
And Rush has always been really, really good about tying real stories into their music as well.
Yeah, so for me, it was my Uncle Terry, my dad's youngest brother. So my dad was the middle boy of three. And my dad died when I was 13 years old. So I looked up to my Uncle Terry. And we're in years, we're actually not that far apart. But I remember we would go to Crossett, Arkansas to visit my grandmother, my dad's mom, and my Uncle Terry. And it was this little mill town. It stank. There was nothing to do. But my Uncle Terry had this Chevy Vega. And it was completely tricked out. He had a great sound system with an 8-track.
Yes.
And my Uncle Terry introduced me to rock and roll. He introduced me to Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, Aerosmith, Boston, like all the classic rock bands you hear today.
Yeah.
Like I first learned about them. I already was listening to the Beatles and stuff on the radio, but he got me deep into rock and roll. And he always treated me not like I was his punk nephew, but like I was just another guy that was going cruising through Crossett with him in his Chevy Vega on a
He had an
Saturday
opportunity
night.
to
And
educate you.
And then years later, when I discovered moving pictures, not years later, actually, it was years later because
1980.
and the first time I heard Red Barchetta, that immediately took me back to cruising with my Uncle Terry in his Chevy Vega, and I was like, "Holy shit! I guess I'm a Rush fan now,"
Yeah. Well,
and I have been ever since.
Yeah. I knew I liked you for some reason.
It's because it's got its action, dude. It's got its action.
I've got a funny story about Russian fandom. So I've never met Alex Lifeson, who's my absolute guitar hero of all time. I never got a chance to meet Neil Peart because he didn't meet the fans. Well, in the early days he did, but later on he didn't. But one time my wife and I were down in Fredericksburg doing a wine country thing, and I saw that Geddy Lee was coming through to promote his book. He was on his book tour for his big, beautiful book of bass, right? I'm like...
And he was going to be
I'm
in
like,
Fredericksburg?
No, Austin.
Okay.
And I'm like, we have to go. We're taking a side trip. We're going to do this. And so I got the tickets. I put on, my old Rush shirts from the 80s that made me look like I was wearing a belly,
crop top?
A crop top belly shirt. Stood in line for hours, went to meet him, had all these things in my head I was going to say. Thank you so much. Because you only get a few minutes. It's kind of like doing pictures at cons, right? You get like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I was just going to tell him about, you were my, you got me through my teenage years, blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much for music, stuff I'm sure he's heard 1,000 times and all that. And then I had a couple jokes I was going to tell him, and stuff, because he's into baseball and he's got some dogs called the Wassermans. People say hi to the Wassermans for me, right? And so anyway, I get up there and my wife is videoing the whole experience. Froze. My mouth would not work. So he's pulling my book open. He's signing the book. He's asking me questions. I'm just like, I mean, I couldn't even make a sound. I completely froze. It was so funny.
Damn it.
My wife is over there, laughing her head off. She's on the video. Geddy turns to her and starts talking to her instead.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. And I had enough, I gathered my wits at the last minute enough to get a fist bump. So I actually said, can I have a fist bump? And that is my experience with meeting one of my heroes.
Oh,
The only words I ever said to him were, "Can I get a fist bump?"
So if I have a fandom, it's music.
Yeah.
100%.
I was going to say books for you. You read a lot.
I do read a lot. That actually started when I was an avid reader from the time I was little, but when I was working on Wishbone, and this is not related to the story I'm about to tell, but as a side note, when I started working on Wishbone, I had a lot of downtime because I was the voice actor, but they insisted that I was on set during filming. So that it was my actual voice interacting with the on-camera actors, right? We learned off the bat really quickly that needed to happen. But a lot of downtime, I would read. Mm. And so, like, if it was an episode we were doing based on whether it was The Hunchback of Notre Dame or Robin Hood or a Sherlock Holmes episode, I was reading it, right? So, yes, I have been a bit of... But even before that, music saved me. So I became a huge fan of music, all kinds of music. And I remember I was freshly out of the Army, and I graduated from high school in 1985. I was very close to my speech and debate teacher. She heard that I'd just gotten out of the military, and she contacted me, and she said, "Hey, if I get you a bus ticket down to Austin, will you come and be a judge at the UIL speech and debate thing? We'll pay you to do it." I had no job and no prospects, so I was like, sure. So I got on a Greyhound, and I went to Austin. And they put me up in the Doubletree Hotel, which for me was 5-star Ritz-Carlton luxury. I'd never been in a hotel this fancy before. It had a glass elevator. Whoa. So I am Gomer Pyle I walk up to the desk. I'm like, I think I'm supposed to be here. You know, the lady was so nice. What's your name? I told her, yes, we have a room waiting for you. Here's your room. Take that elevator, the glass elevator. I get to get in that and go up.
Does it go into the stratosphere? Is there a restaurant above the planet?
I got into the elevator, and then two things happened at once. I got into the elevator, and then a bellhop came in with one of those carts that carries luggage and shit. And I noticed that on the luggage cart were a bunch of guitar cases, which I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And then a guy got on. And I froze. I'm in the back of the elevator. We're all facing forward like you're supposed to in an elevator. And we start going up, and the elevator got stuck between floors. So I tapped the gentleman on the shoulder, and I said, listen, I know this is awkward because we're stuck in an elevator, but I just need to tell you that your music got me through a lot of difficult times. You're still making it. I think it's awesome. I am a fan, and I'm not going to gush too much more, but just to say, I just want to say thank you. And he turned around and looked at me. He goes, well, I appreciate that, man. Are you from around here? And I said, I'm a Texas boy. He goes, me too. I was like, yeah, I know. It was Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
No!
I got stuck in an elevator with Stevie Ray Vaughan. And so then he like turns the tables on me. He's like, well, what do you do? What do you? And I'm like, oh, it's nothing like what you know. Like, I just got out of the Army. I'm down here to judge a speech and debate tournament. He goes, well, no, that's cool, man. You know, that's cool. And I said, are you playing tonight in town? He goes, yeah, I'm doing a concert. And he goes, my brother's band is opening. Well, that's the Fabulous Thunderbirds.
Right.
With Jimmy Vaughn and Kim Wilson and all those guys. And he goes, you think you can make it? And I was like, I don't know. So and then the elevator started working again. I said, well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. He goes, he shook my hand.
Awesome.
He goes, it was a pleasure. So he went off, and I'm like, this is before social media. This is before any. I think what I did was I ran to my room, and I figured out what room my speech coach was in, and I was like, I just got stuck in an elevator with Stevie Ray Vaughan. And God help her, she went, who?
Oh no.
And I was like, never mind. Boom.
Click.
But we can't be friends anymore.
I think like music is my fandom. For sure. It still is.
I can totally relate to that. I had a similar experience with Sarah McLachlan. Catch a little bit of trash on this from a couple different people, but I don't really care. Sarah McLachlan, as she had released albums, the themes of her albums started to parallel things that were going on in my life at the time. And that's why she quickly became one of my favorite artists. And had an opportunity where she was playing up in, a small venue up north near the border of Texas and Oklahoma. I can't remember exactly where, but my wife got tickets for us. And we ended up going into this venue. We were like six rows back. And we had an opportunity to move even further forward to about third row. And I see her up there. But before the show, we started shooting the bull with a couple of people that were there. And if you know anything about Sarah McLachlan, there is a thing that she does at every single one of her shows where you get to sit on the couch. But the only way to get on the couch, which is actually on the stage facing the band, they will have a chance to listen to the music right there, and then Sarah will come up and have conversations with the people on the couch and such. Well, the couple that was sitting next to us at the time, they were so bummed out because they're like, oh, I don't have anything to record this moment. And I said, I will record this moment for you, and then we will find a delivery method for you. And so we had this wonderful moment. I'm so excited for you to be on the couch. And, Sarah's just right there because I had seen her 2 times before. But it was like in nosebleed section where Sarah's like this itty bitty little Lego action figure. Yeah. I can't really see her very well.
Sarah McLachlan.
Lego Sarah McLachlan.
Still beautiful.
Totally. And so I said, the lady was like, is there anything you want me to ask Sarah? And I was like, hey, if you could get your hands on a pick or something like that would be fantastic. And so she has her moment on the couch, and Sarah McLachlan's talking to this lady, and she whispers in Sarah's ear, and then Sarah takes the microphone, looks out into the audience, and says, I'm supposed to say hello to Micah and Valerie, and you can actually see as I'm recording this moment, the camera just go, whoa, and I'm sitting here hyperventilating as quietly as I can so I don't ruin the video that I'm taking for this lady. And we still keep in contact to this day. Super, super nice people, but had that moment, and I got the pick.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
and I put it in my collection, and I just it was just a magical moment.
I have a guitar pick story, and then we can wrap this thing up. But I have to tell the story, and I'm going to do a shout out. I don't know if he listens to this, but I'm going to do a shout out to a good friend of mine who lives right here in your town, which I'm not going to name because I don't want people to start stalking you because we're going to become famous.
Well, obviously,
I have a friend. I have a friend named Brian Bentley. Now, Brian and I do the same thing. We're both actors. Brian's a family man. He's a great guy. He's an avid soccer fan and an avid music fan. He's turned me on to bands as a middle-aged man that I never heard of that I love now, like the Struts. I don't know if you've ever heard the Struts, but if you haven't, get into them. They're awesome. This was a few years ago. So Brian used to have a side gig at the stadium where FC Dallas plays, the MLS club, the Major League Soccer club, FC Dallas, and he was their scorekeeper. I don't know if he's still doing this, but we met up for lunch one day, and he goes, "Hey, I know you're a big music fan." I'm like, "I am," and he said, "Well, a funny thing happened." He goes, I think it was every Friday, before the players arrive, all the staff gets teams together and they do like a scrimmage match, right? And then he goes, well, this particular Friday, there was a band coming to town and in concert, and one of the guys in the band is a huge soccer player, loves to play soccer, and he asked if he could bring himself and some of his crew to the scrimmage. And so, of course, they said yes. So Brian's like, I'm out there playing soccer and this and that, and then it ends and it's all fun and games. And he goes, and I went up to the guy and I said, hey, because the musician had already given out lots of stuff to the staff. And he goes, I have a buddy. And this was what sealed it for me, because this particular musician was also a big fan of my favorite English Premier Soccer club, which is called Arsenal. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge Arsenal fan. That's a different story. He goes, my buddy's a huge Arsenal fan and a huge fan of your band. He goes, guy didn't even hesitate. He pulled out a pick. And on one side of the pick was the Arsenal cannon. That's their logo. Yeah. And on the other side of the pick was the band's logo, FF. It was the Foo Fighters.
Oh, cool.
And it was Chris Shiflett, the lead guitarist.
Nice.
For the Foo
wow.
Fighters.
By the way, so I just got to tell you, I'm totally digging on your build-ups. Like, you have this story, and it's just like, it ramps up, and I'm sitting here on the edge of my seat going,
I so thought he was going to say it was Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah. Come back from the dead. God bless him. This has been a production of Nerdherfers, copyright 2024, all rights reserved. No portion, and I do mean no portion of this broadcast may be used without permission. Please visit nerdherfers.com for more information and full legal disclaimer, you nerd.